Transportation's importance in the modern world is felt across the board, be it in trade, production, or personal use like commute or recreation. After all, there are about 1.4 billion cars in use as of 2019. But this boon does not come without cost. And throughout this essay, we'll see exactly how cars are making us sick, broke, and miserable. Cars pose health and safety risks in four main ways: crashes, pollution, sedentary travel, and isolation. Motorists often drive their cars unaware that 1.19 million people die from traffic crashes annually, becoming the leading cause of death between ages 5 and 29 in recent years. Half of these fatalities are attributed to pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, who are sparsely protected than car passengers. About 46% of the recent global car purchases are SUVs, and due to their tall height and weight, have a higher chance of killing people in crashes, with children 8 times more likely to die from being hit by them than standard cars. Cars also pose a more silent and indirect way of harming us: pollution. Vehicles contribute to air pollution either by their engine running or abrasion of their parts. Road emissions contribute significantly to the worsening air quality, and is a big issue in developing countries or places where there is overpopulation and rapid urbanization. How does tailpipe emission contribute to air pollution exactly? Well, in a very simplified nutshell, a gasoline engine works by injecting a fuel-air mixture into the cylinder and uses a spark plug for ignition, while a diesel engine compresses air first in the cylinder and only then is fuel injected, relying on compression for ignition. As a result, gasoline engines emit more carbon dioxide per liter burned, while diesel engines, although more fuel efficient, produce more nitrous oxides and particulate matter, both of which contributing to air pollution in their own ways. Air pollution comes in different types: gases, particles, toxic organics, and metals. Carbon monoxide is often produced by the incomplete burning of fossil fuels. Its symptoms range from headaches, dizziness, loss of consciousness, and even death. Carbon dioxide, unlike its monoxide brother, is rarely found in lethal levels, but it is now the most abundant greenhouse gas due to human activities going over natural levels, way beyond what natural sinks such as forests could reliably capture. Car emissions are also responsible for both sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. If the stars align, nitrogen oxides, along with volatile organic compounds or VOCs, which some engines also produce, may react with each other under sunlight, forming ground-level ozone or GLO. All three gases are a serious health concern, capable of penetrating deeply into the lungs with effects such as coughing, bronchitis, chronic lung diseases, and other respiratory illnesses. When we think of air pollution, we often think of gases, not small particles in the air. Particulate matter, PM or particulates, is a broad term, usually referring to a mixture of solid and liquid droplets suspended in air. They are formed either mechanically when smaller bits from a larger material are shed or broken off, like the wearing of tires, or via chemical reactions, like the burning of carbon-based fuel. These particles are often classified as PM10, or coarse, which we can sneeze, but not PM2.5 or anything smaller, as these can penetrate the lungs deeply, cause serious respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses, and with year-long exposures may entail neurological complications and even cancer. The last pollutant is lead. Lead was added to gasoline from 1923 all the way to 2021. Even though most countries have banned leaded fuel more than 20 years ago, lead deposition in air or soil could still pose health risks. Children exposed to lead have developed aggressive and delinquent behavior, reduced intelligence, learning difficulties, and hyperactivity. What makes it a significant concern is that it can contaminate land, water, and air, posing a serious risk not just to our health, but also ecosystems and wildlife. Traffic-related air pollution is linked with more health problems, such as circulatory diseases, lung cancer mortality, skin complications like pigmented spots and cancer, increased risks of depression, anxiety, and other psychological complications, mental health issues to children, autism, lower lung volumes and asthma, and leukemia. The World Health Organization estimates that 4.2 million deaths in 2019 are due to ambient air pollution. These fatalities are said to be due to exposure to fine particles that cause cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. Some studies also show a similar link, where lung cancer mortality is linked with fine particles in China. A report cages this observation, with an estimate of 246,000 premature deaths attributed to PM 2.5 and ozone annually from traffic-related sources. A more recent report splits these mortalities into two categories, diesel and gasoline, where they estimate roughly as much as 170,000 deaths for gasoline and as much as 310,000 for diesel. Fortunately, newer diesel cars equipped with filters and designed with modern emission standards emit fewer particles and may contribute to a significant reduction of these figures. Lead exposure does not just contribute to illnesses or poison the environment, it is also lethal. It is estimated that 120,000 people die from lead exposure every year, attributed to vehicles from fuel, batteries, and paint. The next kind of pollution produced by cars is not so silent. Noise pollution is defined by the EPA as unwanted sound that interferes with activities like conversations, sleeping, and more. In cities, the main source of this pollution are vehicles. Negative effects of noise pollution include speech and sleep interference, loss of productivity and hearing, stress, anxiety, tinnitus, high blood pressure, and could indirectly affect cardiovascular health. Although finding the number of health problems directly linked to noise pollution is difficult, a study by the World Health Organization found that at least 1 million healthy life years are lost every year due to traffic-related noise in the western part of Europe, with another 10,000 premature deaths as estimated by a report of the European Environment Agency. Long periods of physical inactivity are not good for the health, and car travel just so happens to promote that. Sedentary behavior is known to increase the risk of all-cause mortality, type 2 diabetes, incidence and mortalities of cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. According to the CDC, only 1 in 4 Americans can achieve the recommended daily aerobic and strengthening guidelines, often because they do not have safe or convenient places for physical activities, as only 39% live a mile away from a park, and only 40% of children report walking to school. Children who are driven around to reach their destinations are less likely to meet the recommended 60-minute physical activity by the World Health Organization. Most American cities are often designed and built for car travel. Consequently, these car-centric cities ensure that everyone, mostly pedestrians, must negotiate with cars for their continued existence. After all, something as simple as crossing a street could turn into a life-and-death situation. This added danger and risk posed by cars steers many from walking and cycling, especially children, thereby reducing rates of physical activity that is essential for health and well-being. Interestingly, a study found that people who switched from cars to public transportation increased their energy expenditure, equivalent to about walking 2 kilometers. And finally, there is social isolation brought about by car use. Car dependency often leads to cities not exactly made for social interactions, with all the physical barriers like long distances, highways, and deadly roads. Not having a car makes it difficult to access food, healthcare, work and education, family and friends, and other social gatherings. Emergency services, like ambulances, are indirectly affected in car-dependent cities because of urban sprawl or excess traffic caused by the growing vehicle fleet in a city. To morbidly add, isolated individuals are also more likely to suffer cardiovascular diseases or cognitive deterioration. Looking back at these health and safety concerns imposed by cars is quite alarming, spanning both physical and mental health dimensions. Notice how even different mechanisms of harm, be it in air or noise pollution, sedentary travel, and isolation, often have a set of common diseases, cardiovascular illnesses, and mental impairment. There is, of course, the outlier with crashes, which, if you get involved in one, you might have to deal with more immediate consequences before developing long-term complications. And remember, these health risks add up cumulatively and are not independent of each other. Getting a good whiff of traffic air while sitting for long periods of time driving, and giving the tires of your car a good licking is akin to the concept of double dipping in video games. Seems like your car hasn't made you sick. Yet. But now let's talk about their true costs. Car ownership carries both obvious individual costs and hidden societal costs. Car payments, gas, and parking fees are obvious. Insurance and maintenance, less so. Then some will never cross our minds, partly because they aren't often related to losing money directly, like time and fuel wasted stuck in traffic, looking for parking, and the depreciation of the value of your vehicle. In car-centric cities, cars are the only way to access healthcare, education, work, and groceries. This potentially forces people to dedicate funds from their income to acquire a car, have a safe place to park it when not in use, and save up for operating costs like fuel and maintenance. About 90% of American households own a car, and in recent years, average annual car ownership costs have risen. In a 2023 report, Americans' annual consumer expenditure for transportation was about $12,295, the second largest spending behind housing. Most of this figure goes to vehicle purchases at approximately $4,496, followed by gasoline and other fuels at $3,120. While an average American household pays roughly 15 to 16% of their income, households with income of less than $25,000 may have to spend as much as 30% of their after-tax earnings. Many low-income families may then have to choose between food for themselves or fuel for their car. And yet, cars are depreciating assets, losing resale value even as maintenance costs climb with age. With the round of tariffs this 2025, costs may be driven, pun intended, even higher. Cars are not just costly for the individuals driving them around, but also for others and those who don't even drive themselves. This is because cars need infrastructure designed, built, and maintained around them to become a viable form of transportation, just like other forms of transport like public transit, though the difference is one is more efficient than the other. Governments, organizations, and individuals invest resources and time to ensure that the infrastructure required by cars is maintained well. Like, for example, the construction of US expressways cost about $1.4 trillion from 1957 to 2010. Cars may impose a cost of about 0.11 euros per kilometer, while walking and cycling provide a more positive benefit of 0.37 and 0.18 euros per kilometer, respectively, largely from improved public health. Parking is only free in illusion. Communities spend billions on lots and garages, up to $75,000 per spot, and these costs are baked into the price of food, housing, and nearly every product or service. In car-dependent cities, homes often bundle off-street parking, raising construction and purchase costs by up to 38%. This forces everyone, even those who did not use these parking spaces at all, to pay the same inflated prices as those who drive around and actually use them. In a nutshell, everyone pays, even if just one of them drives a car, often from their taxes or marked up prices. We know the extent of the impacts of car crashes on our safety and health, but rarely acknowledge the economic aspect of such events. The World Health Organization estimates that road crashes induce a 3% GDP hit for most countries, while a study in 2019 estimated that road injuries will cost the world $1.8 trillion by 2030, assuming a constant value of the US dollar equivalent to its 2010 value. They arrived at this number by taking into consideration both fatal and non-fatal road injuries to the labor supply, as well as the diversion of funds to treat these injuries that could have been used for savings or investments. Of the 166 countries that they accounted for, the 3 countries that lost the most from road injuries are the USA at $487 billion, followed by China at $364 billion, and lastly India at $101 billion. Interestingly, the economic burden of road injuries appears to rise with income levels. as the total loss for high-income countries was roughly 963 billion US dollars, while the total loss for low-income countries was only about 11 billion. Although this comes at the cost of high disability-adjusted life years, or DALY, which is the measure of healthy life years lost from disability or death. Essentially, low and middle income countries experienced almost 90% of the global DALYs. Road injuries equal a high economic burden to high income countries and a high disease burden to low and middle income countries. This disparity may be due to better pre-hospital care, life-saving treatments, higher costs, and greater loss of human capital due to better equipped and educated workers in high-income countries. Despite the low economic burden of road injuries to low and middle income countries, they ultimately suffer the most inhuman toll. And even though low income countries may lose quite less economically from road injuries, they also earn significantly less. As such, getting involved in an accident could be a great financial burden for people in these countries. According to a report by the American Public Transportation Association in 2017, commuters who shift away from cars to public transportation or any other means saved on average $9,800 US. Such savings may be beneficial to many households, especially lower income ones that earn below $25,000. And with the reduction of car usage comes the indirect benefit of less congestion, crashes, and competition for parking spaces for those who still want to drive their cars. Cars aren't just expensive for drivers, they extract hidden fees from everyone as well, via roads, parking subsidies, and crash costs. In addition to your cars eating away your hard-earned money and well-being, they offer one final gift: misery. As usual, cars impart this generosity in many ways, individually and collectively. The car dependency found in the US, with its vast networks of highways, sprawling suburbs, and neglected public transportation, is making Americans unhappy. A study found out that there appears to be a link between having to drive for most out-of-home activities and a decrease in life satisfaction. Although having a car is also linked to an overall increase in life satisfaction, a driving threshold also exists, and if crossed, leads to people reporting lower levels of happiness. These results may be linked to less physical activity, stress induced by navigating through traffic, reduced engagement with people, and the financial burden of owning and maintaining a vehicle. The researchers suggest that having more options may reduce this car fatigue. Mandatory car parking and other policies have encouraged suburban sprawl, which has eroded third places like parks, libraries, and other public spaces, making people use cars even for short trips that don't exceed 3 miles. Another angle for cars making us unhappy is how often they waste our time. Usually, this comes in the form of traffic congestion, searching for available parking, and getting repairs. As more people start to drive their cars, the faster roads fill up, slowing everyone's commute significantly. But this also affects people who walk, cycle, or use public transport like buses, who do not reap the benefits of private transportation, just the burden of traffic congestion caused by excessive cars on the road. To quote Baum et al. 2006, the pursuit of individual mobility becomes collective mobility. Then there is the aftermath of accidents and crashes, mainly whose victims are not at fault. We are already familiar with the upfront impacts of car crashes from the previous section. Now let us elucidate the hidden ones. According to a report by the National Accident Helpline in 2019, the effects of accidental injuries to an individual manifest physically, mentally, and externally in their relationships and work. Roughly 92% have reported some form of pain, with 28% reporting that it took 6 months or more to recover fully. Not only that, but 72% also reported suffering mental issues, with some becoming anxious when visiting the site of the accident or getting back to a vehicle or bicycle after a road accident. These often result in disrupting the individual from resuming their daily routines, such as going to work or school, which ultimately affects their relationships. About 38% of those surveyed said that the accident had hurt their relationships, be it with their partner, children, friends, or even at work. At the end of the day, the effects of such accidents carry weight beyond the injured individual, making it a significant concern, not just for them, but also the people around them, such as family, friends, and co-workers. The misery induced by cars isn't just limited to car owners and drivers themselves. Rather, it spans far and wide throughout society, whether you drive a car or not. A true advocate of social equality, if you ask me. This is often achieved by either reshaping our cities or outright destroying the environment. Cars need a lot of space to accommodate all the storage, parking, road, and gas station needs inherent to them, which require a hefty sum of space, time, and resources to build and maintain. Car usage often encourages land development to spread widely, making cars the most convenient form of transportation to reach essential and non-essential destinations, solving a problem it introduced in the first place. Expressways disperse millions of people from the neighborhoods they cut through, while streets are often dominated by cars as they out-occupy people and other modes of transportation. Parking is rarely useful to anyone but drivers, yet some governments have minimum parking mandates that legally obligate property owners to supply them. This sometimes results in parking lots consuming more land and space than the actual building they are attached to. Too much parking may also impact the travel choices of many people. In 2015, LA had about 200 square miles of land dedicated to parking, roughly equivalent to 18.6 million spaces for both on-street and off-street parking, while there were only 5.6 million registered cars. Essentially, there were about 3.3 parking spaces per vehicle in the county. This abundance of parking may push people into using cars more as the preferred method of transportation over transit, walking, or cycling. Parking can also negatively impact essential uses like housing. A single off-street parking consumes roughly 25 to 33 square meters, about the same size as the average living space per person in China, South Korea, and Spain, or larger than the average living space per person in countries like India, Mexico, Brazil, and Poland. These countries are home to about 3.3 billion people. This essentially means that 40% of the global population, on average, lives in an area equal to or smaller than a parking space. Paved surfaces like streets and parking lots increase local air and surface temperatures. This urban heat island effect not only makes you feel uncomfortable, but also harms human health by exacerbating heat waves, causing heat-related conditions like heat stroke and more. In the previous sections, we have identified how car usage wreaks havoc on our neighborhoods and how their pollution destroys our health. Now let us move on to how they also negatively affect our environment. Experts warn that 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, the limits of what we can do to the planet before suffering serious consequences, have already been transgressed by 2023. And car use is a contributor to at least 4 of these, those being climate change, biosphere integrity, land system change, and novel entities. In 2019, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, estimated that roughly 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions came from transportation, with about 70% of direct transport emissions coming from road vehicles, making cars our single largest source of CO2 in terms of transportation. Those same carbon emissions not only drive climate change, they also degrade ecosystems and worsen natural disasters. From cradle, such as mining, production, and fuel provision, to grave, like landfill, cars emit a significant amount of pollution that lead to vast unwanted environmental harm. Mining, for example, is a wide environmental concern, spanning land, water, air quality, and ecological impacts. Operational-related environmental impacts of cars are common knowledge at this point. Most already know that internal combustion engines produce more greenhouse gases during their use than electric vehicles do, as EVs produce most of theirs during production and powering up instead. According to the IPCC AR6 Working Group 3 report, battery electric vehicles have lower emissions throughout their life cycles compared to internal combustion ones, but only when they are powered with low-carbon power. Essentially, countries must also overhaul their grid infrastructure if they plan on electrifying their vehicles to cut carbon emissions. Not only that, but electric, hybrid, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles require more mining than their gasoline counterparts in current existing manufacturing techniques. And if the globe starts to electrify, we may also see an upsurge in mining materials needed for these vehicles to keep up with the demand. Leftover materials from cars also pose a concern. Usually, at the end of a car's life, certain materials like copper and fuel are removed from the vehicle, and the remaining plastic, glass, and other materials are shredded, with about 2/3 of this residue ending up in landfills and some incinerated, which poisons not just the ground, but also the air. And of course, we cannot forget about tires. Roughly 2 to 3 billion tires are manufactured every year, which pose environmental impacts throughout their life cycle, as they are often made from materials derived from fossil fuels. Metals and microplastics from tires pollute terrestrial, marine, and freshwater ecosystems, contributing to the transgression of novel entities in the planetary boundaries. And about 35% of microplastics released into the ocean come from tires and road markings. Car usage also affects wildlife negatively. Noise pollution is a big concern for wildlife, especially traffic-related, as it may harm their hearing or affect their behavior, like birdsong being obscured by traffic noise. Then there is also the physical danger posed by cars, due to the vast networks of roads being built and developed that cut through their habitat, exposing them to collisions and pollution. Once afflicted by the effects of pollution from air, water, and land, wildlife may suffer from health and reproductive problems. Road networks and car-dependent urban sprawl development consume vast amounts of land, contributing to deforestation and declining biodiversity. Also, about 1 million vertebrates are estimated to be killed per day, totaling hundreds of millions in both Brazil and the US. Cars are not just taking land from us for potential homes, but animals as well, by carving through our neighborhoods and forests. In this essay, we have seen how cars harm us and our society, how they make us sick and injured from crashes, pollution, and sedentary lifestyles, how they make us broke from car payments to having to pay for overpriced goods to maintain parking lots and roads, and how they make us miserable by invading our lands, cutting through our neighborhoods, threatening wildlife, and destroying the environment. We must also acknowledge the genuine benefits automobiles have provided, such as unprecedented freedom to travel anywhere, better job prospects for those living far away, quick and convenient access to healthcare and other services, and a thriving auto industry that employs millions in manufacturing, repair, and logistics. However, it is even more important that we address these harms that cars pose. Most solutions that hope to reduce the negative effects of cars often shift away from pervasive car dependence. Investing in reliable public transportation, compact and walkable cities, and electrification are some of the most common solutions advocated by organizations like the WHO, IPCC, and APTA. Although the exact numbers are hard to pin down, these strategies promise fewer traffic fatalities, cleaner air, lower household expenses, and a renewed sense of social connection. By exactly how much is a concern for another day. Ultimately, cities should serve us first, before cars. Our vehicles exist to carry us, and should never dictate how we build our streets or shape our neighborhoods. Perhaps sometime in the future, we might finally shed our dependence on cars and have our cities be designed for human life first once again.